Imagine you are living 50,000 years ago. No courts, no judges, no lawyers billing you by the hour, no prisons, no police departments, no written law of any kind, no institution of any kind dedicated to the formal administration of justice. And someone in your group just stole your food, or attacked someone weaker without any provocation, or kept taking more than their share at every communal meal while everyone else quietly seethed. Or they started behaving in ways that made the entire group feel genuinely unsafe, erratic, violent, unpredictable, the kind of person whose presence transforms the atmosphere from cooperative to tense and exhausted. What do you do? This is not a rhetorical question. It is one of the most important practical problems ancient humans ever faced. They faced it continuously across hundreds of thousands of years of existence, and they solved it. Not with stone tablets, not with written law, not with any formal institution we would recognize as a justice system today. They solved it with something older, more flexible, and more socially intelligent than anything that came after. And the way they solved it tells us something profound about where every legal system eventually came from. Because here is the thing most people have never been told. The impulse to punish is not a product of civilization. The machinery for social justice did not arrive with cities and kings and written codes. It was running in a remarkably sophisticated form in small bands of hunter-gatherers long before any of that existed. Humans were building justice systems before they built walls. Let us go through exactly how it worked, and then what happened when civilization arrived and decided to formalize everything.
First, you have to understand the social context of pre-agricultural life, because the context changes everything about what punishment meant and why it took the forms it took. Pre-agricultural hunter-gatherers lived in small, highly mobile bands of typically 20 to 50 individuals. Everybody knew everybody. You could not hide your behavior for long. You could not develop a reputation in one part of town while behaving differently somewhere else, because there was no other part of town. The community was the entire social world, and it was observing everything continuously. In a group that size, there is effectively no private behavior the group does not eventually learn about through proximity, observation, and the oldest information network in human history, gossip. This created a social environment radically different from modern, anonymous urban life. Your reputation was not merely socially important in this world, it was existential. Your survival, your access to shared resources, your ability to form alliances all flowed directly from your standing. Destroy your reputation, and you did not lose social status in the way a modern person loses social status. You lost access to everything the group made possible, which, in a Paleolithic environment, was essentially everything that separated you from an extremely difficult solo existence. A landscape full of predators, unpredictable food availability, and no safety net of any description. This is the foundation on which the entire pre-agricultural justice system rested. Not law, not authority, not force applied by designated officials. The foundation was interdependence, and the awareness of interdependence shared implicitly, never needing to be written down. That your continued membership in good standing within this group was the single most important asset you possessed. Today, your reputation costs you a job or a friendship. Back then, it cost you your life. That difference in stakes is what made the ancient justice system work.
Anthropologist Christopher Boehm spent decades studying hunter-gatherer societies across every inhabited continent. His conclusion, after analyzing 48 distinct human societies, was both elegant and genuinely counterintuitive. Hunter-gatherer societies were not anarchic. They were intensely, deliberately, collectively egalitarian. And they maintained that egalitarianism through a sophisticated multi-stage system of social enforcement, operating without any formal institution, designated authority, or written rule of any kind. Boehm called it the reverse dominance hierarchy. In most primate societies, the powerful dominate the weak. Alphas take the best food, the best mates, the best resting positions. Power flows downward from the top. Hunter-gatherers flipped this entirely. In band societies, the collective dominated the individual. If anyone started accumulating more than their share of food or more status than the group was comfortable with, the group closed ranks against them, not through any formal process, through coordinated, sustained, escalating social pressure that started soft and became progressively harder until the problem was either resolved or removed. The system had clear, consistent stages, appearing with striking similarity across cultures that never had contact with each other. This is the part that should stop you in your tracks. Cultures separated by oceans and thousands of years independently arrived at the same justice structure. That tells you this was not a cultural accident. That tells you this was human nature solving the same fundamental problem the same fundamental way. 4 stages. Every culture, no contact between them. Stage 1, gossip. And before you dismiss that as trivial, hear what gossip actually does here, because it is doing serious, serious work.
In a hunter-gatherer setting, gossip is not idle social entertainment. It is a powerful, functionally essential tool for collective moral enforcement. When someone began behaving in ways the community found unacceptable, hoarding food, bullying weaker members, free riding on others' labor, the community started talking about it, not to the offender's face initially, among themselves, building shared understanding that this specific person was a specific problem, developing consensus, coordinating a collective interpretation before any public action was taken, so that when public action did arrive, it arrived with the full weight of unanimous community opinion, rather than as an individual accusation the offender could dismiss or retaliate against personally. Anthropological research on the Kung San of the Kalahari, the Hadza of Tanzania, the Jew Honsi, and multiple Aboriginal Australian groups consistently finds gossip serving precisely this regulatory function. It is the early warning system, the community newsletter, the consensus building mechanism, and the social verdict delivery system, all operating simultaneously in casual conversation. Before any formal sanction is applied, the community has already reached an informal distributed verdict through thousands of small conversations that together constitute a collective social trial, conducted without any designated venue, judge, or procedure. The offender usually knows the gossip is happening. In a group of 30 people living in constant proximity, you can feel the shift in social temperature, the conversations that stop when you approach, the sharing that happens slightly less fluidly, the eye contact calibrated differently. And frequently at this stage alone, before anything more formal occurs, the offender changes their behavior because they understand, without anyone spelling it out, what the next stages look like. This is deterrence without a criminal code. Stay with this, because what comes next is where it gets genuinely dark.
If gossip failed to produce the necessary correction, the second stage was public criticism and ridicule, delivered openly in front of the entire group. In a small band society, public ridicule is not a minor social discomfort you eventually forget about. It is a serious social event with lasting structural consequences. When the community confronts an offender's behavior openly, naming it, mocking it, calling it out explicitly, the target is receiving a very precise communication. The informal protection and goodwill the group normally extends to its members has been formally suspended for you, pending behavioral correction. Boehm's research found this pattern with striking consistency across cultures separated by thousands of miles. The Inuit of the Arctic, the Kung San of southern Africa, multiple Aboriginal Australian groups, all maintained active traditions of public criticism aimed at those who hoarded, bullied, or refused to share. The specific forms varied, the function was identical. A particularly striking version of this is what anthropologists call leveling mechanisms, communal practices designed with explicit intent to prevent any individual from accumulating too much status. In multiple documented hunter-gatherer cultures, a successful hunter was not expected to celebrate his own achievement. A man who returned to camp and loudly proclaimed he had made a remarkable kill was considered boorish and dangerous. He would be mocked. The kill was real,
The food was shared, everyone ate it, but the social credit was distributed collectively rather than concentrated in the individual who produced it. If he pushed back and insisted on receiving the recognition he felt he had earned, the community pushed back harder, because what looked like a dispute about credit was understood by everyone as a dispute about power. And allowing one person to accumulate power beyond what the egalitarian structure permitted was understood as an existential threat to the social order that kept everyone safe. Think about that. In ancient justice, bragging was a crime.
When public ridicule failed to produce correction, the third stage was ostracism, and this one had consequences that were, in the ancient context, genuinely severe. In a modern city, being shunned by a social group is painful but ultimately survivable. There are other social options. You can move neighborhoods, join different communities. The infrastructure of modern life does not depend on any specific group accepting you. In a small band of 20 to 50 people moving through a Paleolithic landscape, with the nearest other human group potentially weeks of difficult travel away, being excluded from the community was not a social consequence in the modern sense. It was a death sentence with a variable delay, delivered without anyone having to physically harm you. You could not hunt as effectively alone as a coordinated group could. You could not defend yourself against predators during sleep without others watching. You could not process large game, tend injuries, survive serious illness alone. Exclusion from the band meant exclusion from the cooperative infrastructure that made survival viable. It exposed every vulnerability that group membership had been quietly shielding. Ostracism in documented hunter-gatherer societies operated in degrees matching the escalating structure. Initially, it might manifest as a subtle reduction in sharing. The offender remained technically included but found resources reach them slightly less smoothly. The social warmth that had previously surrounded them had been dialed down in ways that were real but individually deniable. If behavior continued, the exclusion formalized. In highly mobile groups, the community could simply move camp without the offender, a specific cruelty available only to people who move regularly and control entirely whether any individual knows where they have gone. For persistent bullies and chronic resource thieves, when ostracism was fully applied, the outcomes documented in the ethnographic record were typically one of two things: behavioral correction and cautious reintegration, or death, either from the practical vulnerabilities of isolation or from the escalation to the fourth and final stage.
The fourth stage was execution. Hunter-gatherer execution is one of the most consistently documented and most genuinely startling findings in anthropology. Boehm compiled execution cases from across dozens of hunter-gatherer cultures on multiple continents and found the practice not only widespread but structurally consistent in ways that reveal a coherent underlying logic. When a member of the group had committed sufficiently serious offenses and, critically, had failed to respond to every lesser intervention the community had applied, the group collectively reached a consensus decision to kill them. Not a designated authority figure acting on institutional mandate, not a chief exercising unilateral power, the entire adult community reaching consensus through the same distributed deliberation process that characterized every earlier stage. The deliberately collective structure of the decision was not incidental, it was the whole point. An individual who killed another group member was a murderer and would be treated as one. A community that had collectively decided a member had become an intolerable threat was doing something categorically different. The communal nature of the act removed it from the domain of personal grievance and placed it explicitly in the domain of social necessity. Responsibility was distributed so broadly that no single person bore the full weight of it. The offenses that drew this ultimate response were consistent across cultures: unprovoked and repeated serious violence against group members, predatory behavior that multiple rounds of lesser intervention had demonstrated was not going to stop. The threshold was not a single act in the heat of conflict. The pattern preceding community-sanctioned execution was almost universally of documented escalation. A person who had been warned, mocked, partially excluded, fully excluded, and who had responded to each stage by continuing or escalating precisely the behaviors that made them dangerous.
This is, in its essential structure, recognizably a justice system, not a primitive proto-version of one, a justice system.
It has proportionality. Minor offences produce minor sanctions. Serious offences escalate through progressively severe responses. It has process. The community does not jump from first offence to execution. It works methodically through stages, with space for correction at every level. It has consensus. No individual decides alone. It has purpose. The explicit goal is not personal revenge, but restoration of a safe, cooperative environment. Now, stay with me here, because what comes next changed everything, and not entirely for the better. Fast forward several thousand years, humans settle, build farms, build cities, build states, and the justice system did not immediately improve in every dimension. It got more elaborate, it got written down, it got scalable, and it introduced something the hunter-gatherer system had been specifically designed to prevent. The oldest physical law code archaeologists have recovered is the Code of Ur-Nammu, written in ancient Sumer in Mesopotamia around 2100 to 2050 BCE, more than 4,000 years ago. Inscribed on clay tablets in cuneiform script, organized in a logical if-then structure that any modern lawmaker would immediately recognize. If a person commits offense X, the legal consequence is Y. Clean, legible, consistent, written down so it applied predictably to everyone. What is genuinely remarkable about Ur-Nammu's code is its approach to physical harm. For bodily injury, knocking out someone's eye, breaking a bone, knocking out a tooth, the code specified monetary fines rather than physical retaliation. A knocked-out eye cost the offender half a mina of silver. A knocked-out tooth cost 2 shekels of silver. The orientation was toward financial compensation for the victim rather than physical punishment on the offender, restore the balance economically, make the harmed party as whole as money could manage. That measured approach did not survive the next 3 centuries intact.
Around 1750 BCE, a Babylonian king named Hammurabi commissioned what became the most famous legal document in ancient history. 282 laws carved into a black diorite pillar standing more than 7 feet tall, discovered by French archaeologists in 1901 in what is now Iran, now held in the Louvre in Paris, where it remains one of the most visited artifacts in the museum. Hammurabi's code moved decisively away from the compensation model of Ur-Nammu towards something the ancient world would become permanently associated with: an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. The principle is called lex talionis, the law of retaliation. Hammurabi did not invent the concept, but he elevated it to formal prominence it had never previously achieved. Under his code, the punishment was designed to mirror the crime, physically and directly. If a builder constructed a house that collapsed and killed the owner's son, the builder's son would be executed, not the builder, his son. The logic of collective family accountability for individual crimes produced striking and troubling provisions, but the element that most sharply distinguishes Hammurabi from everything before it is this: its explicit, formal, built-in class stratification of punishment. If a free man knocked out the eye of another free man, the free man lost his eye. If the same free man knocked out the eye of a slave, he paid a fine. The physical injury in both cases was identical. The social status of the victim determined the entire legal response. The harm to the victim was the same. The law treated it as categorically different, depending on who the victim was. This was genuinely new. This was what settled hierarchical, institutionally governed society added to the justice equation. Formal, consistent rules combined with explicit codification of inequality.
The hunter-gatherer band, with its obsessive leveling mechanisms and its reverse dominance hierarchy and its deep collective suspicion of any individual accumulating disproportionate power, would have recognized Hammurabi's code instantly as precisely the thing it had been working to prevent. Bohm documented how hunter-gatherer communities actively resisted attempts by any member to claim special treatment, including specifically the claim that harm done to a more important person deserved a more serious response. The whole reverse dominance hierarchy existed to prevent exactly that logic from taking hold. Civilization wrote that logic into law and called it justice. That is the thing worth sitting with.
The people with no courts, no judges, no lawyers, no written laws had built into their justice system a feature that every subsequent civilization struggled to achieve. The powerful were not exempt from social sanction. The entire point of the reverse dominance hierarchy was that nobody was exempt. Being stronger or better at hunting or more charismatic brought you no protection whatsoever from communal enforcement of shared behavioral norms. If anything, accumulating any of those advantages made the community watch you more carefully, not less. The shift to written codes and formal institutions brought genuine, irreplaceable benefits: predictability across a much larger population, protection from purely arbitrary individual decisions by whoever happened to have power, the ability to govern communities far too large for everyone to know everyone personally. But it also introduced the formalization of social inequality into the structure of justice itself, in a way that the hunter-gatherer system had been actively and consciously fighting against for most of human existence. The ancient humans standing in collective judgment over a chronic bully did not have a courtroom or a gavel or a legal code or a professional vocabulary. But they had something that every court in every civilization that followed was trying to replicate: the genuine consensus of a community that collectively cared about the outcome. Everything else was infrastructure: the codes, the courts, the carved stone pillars, the lawyers. The impulse it was all built around was already fully formed before any of it existed. Now think about what this means for the modern legal systems you live inside right now. Every time a jury deliberates collectively before delivering a verdict, that is the distributed consensus mechanism of the hunter-gatherer band in a suit and tie. Every time a community demands accountability from a powerful person others had ignored, that is the reverse dominance hierarchy activating exactly as Bohm described. Every time a workplace shuns a colleague who crossed a line everyone knew was there, that is stage 3 of the ancient justice system running in a modern open-plan office. The system never went away, it just got new clothes. The gossip still comes first, the public ridicule still follows, the exclusion still happens when the earlier stages fail. You have seen all 4 stages play out in workplaces, schools, online communities, neighborhoods, because the stages are not cultural, they are biological. They are written into the operating system of human social behavior. 300,000 years of selection pressure for behaviors that kept the cooperative group functional and safe does not disappear because you built a courthouse. It runs beneath the courthouse. The lawyers work on top of something the lawyers did not build and cannot replace. What they built was always in service of what was already there. Here's what all of this adds up to, and it is worth sitting with for a moment. The hunter-gatherer justice system, with its 4 escalating stages, was not a crude, undeveloped prototype. In several important respects, it was more sophisticated than the early written codes that replaced it. It had genuine proportionality built in from the ground up. It had multi-stage process with space for correction at every level. It had a distributional ethics encoded in its design. The powerful were not exempt. The entire point was that nobody was exempt. Now think about every modern institution that has tried to solve the same problem and failed. Every system that protected the powerful punished the weak and called it justice. Every institution where status determined the response and harm to victims was filtered through rank. The ancient system the hunter-gatherers ran was specifically designed to prevent exactly this, and they ran it successfully for hundreds of thousands of years without a single written rule. The next time you see a community collectively turn against someone who crossed a clear line, you are watching something 300,000 years old activate in real time. The next time you gossip about someone's behavior with a friend and feel slightly guilty about it, understand that you are running the first stage of a justice protocol older than civilization itself. The next time a workplace, a school, a community closes ranks against someone who made everyone unsafe and you feel the impulse to join that process, you are not being tribal. You are being exactly what your species spent 300,000 years becoming, a social animal with a built-in justice system older than any court that has ever existed. The impulse to punish wrongdoing is not a flaw in human nature, it is a feature.
It was selected for because communities that enforced behavioral norms survived, communities that did not, did not. Every court in history is just the formal version of what 30 people in torn clothes already knew how to do. If this changed how you see justice, share this, comment what surprised you most, and stay with Drun.